right away. Because boom, that doesn't matter. Whether you're Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, everybody can practice mindfulness. Everybody can meditate, and everybody can learn to develop genuine acceptance in whatever they're feeling in the moment. And one of the key aspects to cultivating acceptance is to begin to let go of desire.
I'm so glad to have the guest that we have on today. I have been looking forward to having him on my podcast since before I even knew I wanted to have a podcast. And it's exciting to see this, manifest and come into fruition, full circle. Him and I actually met, I'd say about 3-4 years ago at a conference in Connecticut, Hartford, Connecticut, which was a very exciting time when people were going out and hundreds of people at conferences, handshakes were like a normal thing. So being able to, see this come around full circle and have this guest on, it's amazing, an amazing feeling for me. And leading off to, Zach is a mental health advocate, national speaker, college success coach, and author of You're Not Alone, who was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder in 2016. During that time period, he experienced severe anxiety, deep depression, and thoughts of suicide. After hitting his rock bottom moment, he sought help and started to recover. Through his recovery process, he became mental health first aid certified and now travels the country educating thousands of students on the fundamentals of mental health. Thank you for being here with us today, Zach.
Yes, thank you for having me, Vic. It's I remember when we met, man. It was a cold, talking about dark and cold. It was a cold, dark night in Hartford, Connecticut. But people were out and about, which was nice. Handshakes were still normal, and yeah, it was pre-pandemic vibes. So it was a good time, man. And I had a feeling about you. You were still in college, and I was really just getting my start speaking, and so I still remember you just being a really personable, outgoing, go-getter kind of guy. And I was like, yeah. So when you reached out to me for the podcast, I was like, absolutely. I want to support the dream and the cause and the path that you're on. So yeah, thank you for having me on.
I just wanted to mention your book, You're Not Alone, helped my wife and I connect while we were going through a very tough time. In the last year, quick update, moved out of our home state from New Jersey to Virginia. We got married, and we had our first son, which is just a dense, a very very dense, packed year. It was also 2020 in the pandemic. So after learning that you were going to be releasing your book, I was like, yo, this is a perfect time for us to sit down and we like read it to ourselves, read it to our son, and thank you so much for that. It means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with me. It's funny. It's like you don't really know you don't always get to see the impact of the work. You know what I mean? So it's always, for me, it's always like, it's what keeps me motivated when I hear testimonies like that. So yeah, man, I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'm glad it was impactful. I know 2020 just, I'm thankful for 2020 in the sense that it's brought mental health to the forefront of everybody's life. And now it's a conversation that everybody wants to have, more or less, because we've all finally felt the effects of stress, overwhelm, anxiety, depression, and then even in some cases, thoughts of suicide. There are people that have experienced that in the last 12 to 16 months. And I just think I'm just really trying to put pressure on these conversations because I think that they're really important. So I'm glad that you and your wife found that valuable. And even just the fact that you found talking about your own mental health with each other to be valuable. That's evolution.
Yeah, for
That's
real.
that's evolution. So I appreciate that.
For real. Thank you. I did want to touch on the subject of for me, it was like a shock to hear that some people never have suicidal thoughts. And I was
Mm,
like, that is such a blessing to never have experienced that thought, because I've had my deep down lows where I'm like, it's I've learned, because I know how to experience it, I've learned how to go about, people joke
mm,
around with killing themselves way too much. Oh, I'm just gonna go jump off a bridge. I'm just gonna shoot. It's like people joke around with that. And I'm like, there's people that actually think about this every single day,
mm, mm.
which, it allowed me the chance to be able to seek not only help for myself, but knowing how to have that conversation with people.
It's an interesting point that you bring up, and that's why I think what's interesting. Okay, so like as human beings, we are the most complex species on the face of the planet. We are the only species that can experience life as richly as we do. But
Mhm.
what does that mean? So, okay, I can go to this restaurant and taste and savor and enjoy this delicious meal. I can experience the wonder and joy of love, romantic love, and marriage, and partnership, and companionship, and the birth of a child. I can look at a sunset and feel something deeply. But for every emotion that we can feel on this spectrum that we all live on that is deemed positive, there is an opposite emotion or experience that we can feel as well. And that comes in the form of stress, overwhelm, anguish, anger, jealousy, greed, and it can lead to suicidal thoughts. Now, here's what I'll say though about suicidal thoughts, and actually why I would politely, uh, I would politely. I actually think you said two things at once. You kind of said, "What a beautiful thing that nobody ever has to experience suicidal thoughts," but then in the same vein said that it's made you more of an empathetic person and more capable of having conversations. And I actually think that the gift inside of going to that depth of your brain, and again, still experiencing life richly, because you are experiencing life richly, is going so deep into the depths of your own brain, into who you are as a person, and what I like to say, walking the tightrope of life. And if you do it right, you actually come out the other side, first off, a healed version of yourself. And just like with a muscle, when it's broken down, when it heals, it comes back stronger. So you also then come back a stronger version of yourself. But then in addition to that, if you do the healing process right, you come back a more compassionate, empathetic version of yourself. So that when somebody comes to you and says, "I'm having suicidal thoughts," your response isn't, "Oh, I've never experienced that before. Take your mind off of it. Go on a run, you'll feel better." Instead, you say, "Sit down and have a conversation with me. Tell me more about this. I've been there myself, I've felt it, and I know that there is a lot of positive that can be found in this experience, but we just have to work through it step by step." And so I just think that's one of the conversations I'm trying to put pressure on. We're going to, as humans, especially in this complex world that we live in now, where there is more coming at us than ever before. Ironically, we are the most comfortable as a human species that we've ever been. I mean, I can pull out my device right now
Mhm.
and get that Uber Eats to the door. I could get Amazon packages delivered to my doorstep. I don't have to lift a finger if I don't want to. And yet, psychologically, we still suffer.
Hmm.
And that's because of the complexity of our brains. And so that's the first thing that we have to understand, is that sure, as we evolve technologically, as we continue to improve the comforts of our lives, it's actually going to be even more paramount that we, at the same time that this storyline is running, as human beings are advancing technology, like the comforts of living, we also need to run another parallel storyline where we are taking our brain health, our mental health very seriously, because our brains are still evolving and they haven't caught up with the times.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's a lot there.
oh, wow.
There's a lot there that I want to ask you. Well, the first thing I want to ask for sure is, a lot of times, so obviously it sounds like you're an advocate for expressing and experiencing emotion, whether it's a good or bad emotion, so that you can learn the lesson or the blessing from that emotion, right?
Mm,
um but a lot of times what I've ran into is a lot of people, because of the negative connotation of bad emotions, people fear those bad emotions, and it
mm.
kind of puts a negative on top of a negative in a sense. So what do you say to somebody that's saying, well, I'm fearful for the negatives that happen in my life, and how do they overcome it? Because right now we're transitioning into experiencing more emotions and stuff like that, I guess. But yeah, what would you say to that, I guess?
Honestly, it's a great question, Matt. And I call this the layered cake. So we feel anxiety and then we're anxious about being anxious. We feel depression and then we're depressed about feeling depressed. We feel stress and then we're stressed about being stressed. So exactly what you're talking about is the compounding effect, or what I like to call the layered cake approach to experiencing emotion. And think about it. You feel this with positivity. I guarantee you right now, if I ask both of you, you could think about a day right now, you could pull it off the top of your head that you were the happiest you've ever been, or just a day when you were happy, like really genuinely happy. And if you actually inspected and observed that happiness, you would also notice that you felt happy about feeling happy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And so how do we get out of this trap of life that is suffering, right?
Mhm.
The Buddha said that a core component of life is suffering, right? So how do we learn to coincide and exist with this suffering? Because the one guarantee in life, and you all, I'm not saying anything new, is change. So if
Oh yeah.
every single day can change, then every single emotion can change. And our emotions change sometimes on a minute by minute basis. I can
Yeah.
speak for myself.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So how do we coexist? Matt, it's a great question. How do we begin to live with these tougher emotions? Well, this is the cultivation of acceptance. It's a core concept in Buddhism, it's a core concept in mindfulness.
Mhm.
And I like to strip the religion aspect out of it right away,
Mhm.
because boom, that doesn't matter whether you're
Mhm.
Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist. Everybody can practice mindfulness.
Mhm.
Everybody can meditate, and everybody can learn to develop genuine acceptance in whatever they're feeling in the moment. And one of the key aspects to cultivating acceptance is to begin to let go of desire.
Yup.
Think about this simple thing. I'm depressed. I'm feeling depressed. What is the narrative and thought process that's going over and over and over again in my head? I'm feeling depressed. I wish that I just
Mhm.
felt good again. I wish that I just felt happy again. That's a desire. So it creates that layered cake again, where you're depressed about feeling depressed. And so one conversation again, to add on to Matt's question, that I'm trying to put pressure on, in addition to this idea that we're going to experience every type of emotion, is that we have to develop the life skill of cultivating acceptance and beginning to recognize that desire is it's a great evolutionary tool, because we need to desire to be hungry so that we can
Yeah.
feed to survive. We need to
Ambition.
desire sex so we can procreate and create new life.
Mhm.
There is a place for desire, but in modern times, we desire too much. And
Mm.
as a result of that, we suffer. And so we have to learn to create acceptance. Now, this does not mean that we throw our hands up in the air and say, oh, I'm depressed. I feel depressed. I guess there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just going to be depressed for the rest of my life. Quite the opposite. It's the acceptance that, oh, I am feeling this emotion right now, and that's okay. That acceptance, right? Okay, it's okay that I feel this way. And it's also okay, another form of acceptance, to go and address this
Mm.
Okay.
and heal from this. And so that is, Matt, I'm so glad you asked that question, because that is the acceptance that we need to start cultivating in our society, is that especially as men, okay, I don't always have to be this macho, strong, tough guy. And in fact, I'm actually completely okay admitting or accepting the fact that I feel depressed or anxious, because honestly, to live with those emotions is way stronger than to always live with happiness, joy, right? Fulfillment. The
Right.
emotions that make us stronger are the hard ones, and yet those are the ones we're the most ashamed about.
Hmm.
So
Right.
it's a
Wow.
contradiction.
I'm actually really glad you kind of talked about that. So to give you kind of a synopsis of where I'm at in my life right now is I'm actually moving. So like I'm in the process of moving, and like my whole routine and ritual is completely thrown off, right? For
Mm,
like these few days. And I feel like I'm going crazy because I desire
yep.
my habitual routine of this is what I do, this is what works, this is what I love, and the same
Right.
process. But now that you're saying like, okay, well, accept that, hey, this is only a temporary situation,
That's
right?
right.
And just try to make the best out of it, and don't kind of beat yourself up, and don't over kind of layer it, if you will. So
Mhm.
definitely got some value out of that. So I really appreciate that, man.
Hey.
That is a wonderful real world example. That's literally the perfect, like, whoever's listening to this right now, that is the perfect example. What is the area in your life where you're beating yourself over when, to your point, it's just temporary?
Yeah.
That's it. So I love that. It's a great example.
I wanted to add on to that. You mentioned, Zach, that the emotions that are the hardest to deal with, the ones that give us um, the most power, the most life, are the tough ones, you know.
Mm,
And I always looked at it like, oh, this is something that I found out in the last like year or two, and like incorporating it into everyday life and conversation is through our biggest breakdowns we achieve our best breakthroughs,
yep.
right? You cannot have a breakthrough, you cannot have a realization, an epiphany, a growth spurt without having a breakdown and having
Mm,
to deal with those tough, keep asking yourself the question of why do I want this, why do I want that, and once you um, get down deep enough, you kind of having a realization of, you know um, what am I doing, and where am I heading.
mm,
And with that, I wanted to head into, just I wanted to dissect what you mentioned just a little bit more, about emotions. So I found this out about, I'd say, in the last 2 years. Emotions are energy in motion,
mm-hmm.
right? Our feelings are something different.
Right.
So if the emotions that we're feeling is the emotion, like the energy in motion that's happening in us or around us, and then our feelings is our interpretation to the emotions that we're feeling. So would you be able to give me your breakdown on that?
I mean, it's perfectly said. That's exactly what it is. So, in cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which is the scientifically proven best way to treat depression, anxiety, stress, overwhelm, thoughts of suicide, schizophrenia, OCD, bipolar. It's basically the overarching talk therapy um, in in the psychology field. And basically, what they found is what you just said. So in life, it's called the ABC method, but essentially, there's activating events, things that we go through, and then there's consequences, right? AKA our interpretations. And the consequences are, okay, these are the emotions that I feel. And because of these emotions, these are the behaviors I exhibit, right? So somebody cuts you off in traffic and I feel angry and frustrated. And my behavior is I'm now going to lay on my horn, or I'm going to speed up, cut around you, cut back in front of you, and now lay on my brakes. Because who
That's
dare
exactly.
cut in front of me?
Yeah.
And what people tend to miss, and what cognitive behavioral therapy aims to do, is get people to stop looking at A to C, activating event to consequence, my behavior, my emotions, and instead unpack B, which is our beliefs. And as human beings, we tend to skip. This happened to me, this event, this traumatic event happened to me in my life. This girl broke up with me and broke my heart. And as a consequence, I felt depressed and upset, and now my behavior is all women are bad.
Mm.
And what we miss is the belief in the middle. What is the belief, the idea, the set of rules, the set of principles that we developed, right? Your interpretation is exactly what you're describing of what we've been through. And the idea is this should be taught in every school on the face of the planet, because this is a mood regulation tool where people can self-regulate themselves, is exactly what you just said. Taking a step back, saying, okay, what I'm feeling is just an interpretation of what I've gone through. Let me unpack the belief system. Because people are going to go through things. That's inevitable. Because you also touched on that in your sentence, right? You can't have a breakthrough without a breakdown. So that part of life is inevitable. I wish I could sit on this podcast and tell all of your listeners that life is going to be great, that nothing bad is ever going to happen to them. Follow Zach's 10-step process to the perfect life. I can't do that, because shit is going to happen. But what I can promise your listeners is that if they begin to examine the belief systems behind their emotions and behaviors, they can begin to live a much more fruitful life.
So this is going to be $1 million question. How do
I
you
love that.
identify B?
How do
So
you
point
identify
B
B?
is your belief. How do
Right.
I say I'm going through this emotion? I'm feeling this way. How do I identify the belief so that I can fix it? Because you have to be very self-conscious in that case to understand that this one single belief is causing, this effect.
Absolutely, Matt. And it's a great question. And what we're talking about is the development of self-awareness. And the best way to identify B, and as an advocate, like, I have to come out and say this because it really is the best way. I do it. I highly recommend everybody should, is go to therapy. Go see a cognitive behavioral therapist. It doesn't mean, in fact, I just had this conversation with my fiance because we've had a massive breakthrough on our end, and just with friends and people near us, going to therapy is personal development. It is not something is wrong with you. Now, look, here's the thing. This is the analogy I always use. Is it easier to remodel and rewire the kitchen if it's normal as it is, or if it's on fire? And everybody will always say, well, of course, it would be a lot easier to remodel a kitchen if it's not on fire and rewire it. Because that's when you're doing cognitive behavioral therapy, you're just rewiring your brain and the way that you think. So, of course, I would rather get people into therapy before they're experiencing deep depression, right? Thoughts of suicide, severe anxiety. But going to therapy does not mean anything is wrong with you. It actually just means that you're willing to invest in yourself. And so that was a long way of saying the very best way to do it, to become aware of B, which is a great question, is to go to therapy, because in therapy, you will develop the skill of self-awareness. And that is where a therapist will walk you through a step-by-step process through questioning that will guide you to be, because it's not linear. That's the one thing, again, $1 million question. This would also be the $1 million solution. If somebody had the linear step-by-step easy process from literally from point A to point B, right? Somebody would absolutely put a monopoly on that and run the market. But it's a lot more messy than that. But it's basically through examining these events that we've been through and then asking why. Why do I behave the way that I do? Why do I think the way that I do? Why do I believe this thing that I do? And beginning to unpack it with somebody else is the best way possible. But for people that have been through therapy and have started to develop that skill of self-awareness, I do think that you can eventually get to the point where you can self-regulate yourself in that particular area. But there's always going to be other ones popping up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a constant development process.
It is. Absolutely.
So I'm glad that you touched on the subject of thought,
Yeah.
because it there's a lot of I just had this conversation at a bar the other day. I was my wife and I were celebrating, and things are extremely watered down in today's
Mm,
society, you know?
mm,
So um, it's so much, in fact, that people think the wrong way.
mm.
People don't like, and it's not no one's fault. You know, I don't believe people do things with bad intentions. I feel like innately, we're all good. You know, I feel like
Right.
I'm a faithful person.
Mm,
And I don't mean faithful as religion goes. I mean faithful as far as I I'm optimistic. I believe people,
mm.
if you give them the chance and in their right state of mind, because your state of mind has a lot to do with that, and it equates to your thinking, your logic, you're gonna want to be blissful. You're gonna want to be
Mm.
happy. You're gonna want to be at peace. You know, but we're not always in our right state of mind because of the pressure that um just life has, especially, um I say in the United States, but it can happen anywhere where, we don't really appreciate the little things like breathing, like
Breath.
taking a step back and just appreciating um,
Right.
those little things that, your blood pumping. Our hearts are in a relentless battle. Like they are just boom, boom, boom. It don't stop. And when it do stop, that's it.
It stops. Yeah, exactly. Life
Right.
stops. Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
in those moments, I feel like we need to be very mindful, as you mentioned, on the way we think. And like Matt had mentioned earlier about our belief system, he was asking
Mm,
about our belief system. I thoroughly believe that sometimes we need to take a step back from what we believe and reanalyze and refine and retune what where we are, because you might believe something, from when you started believing in morals, 10 years old until you were 20, 25, and you've accomplished so much in that set of space. It might be time to sit down and reanalyze what morals, what values, and what things I need to add on to my book, and what I need to take away from.
right.
And with
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, with that, I'm just leading to um you mentioned how I absolutely love how you equated therapy to personal development,
Hmm.
right? And putting an emphasis and pressure on the conversation of how vital personal development is, not only for ourselves, but for our loved ones,
Mm,
for the people that we hang out with often, for people that we value, our children, our spouses, our fiancés, our parents. If we invest in our personal development, we can be better for them and
yeah.
for us
Yep.
in the moment and in the future.
That's right.
Right. So I just want to say thank you for mentioning how therapy, is it there's been a bad impression on it because people think that if you're seeking therapy, you're on fire.
That's
Where,
right.
you can seek therapy to further develop and enhance yourself. So I wanted to touch on, I saw you made a post the other day on how to get a good therapist, because I
Mm,
have been to a bad therapist, and maybe it just wasn't a good fit, maybe they weren't a bad therapist, but you need to have a certain dynamic with someone and a
mm.
certain understanding in order for it to be as developmental as you want it to be. So for those people that might never have been to a therapist or might have been to a therapist and not had a good impression, um, what would you say to them to get them to open up again to trying to seek therapy for whatever reason? It might just be to talk to someone.
That's right. So the first thing that I would call out is that, and this is to Matt's question, it's a bit of that self-awareness. So it can be tough at first. This is a muscle, but examining your resistance. And ultimately, I think what people find when you examine the resistance is that ego is at play. And at the core of ego is pride. And pride is an emotion that oftentimes holds us back to our own detriment. Pride can have a place in society, right? You can be prideful about your work. You can pride can make you want to carry yourself in a certain way. You guys are both very professional, very well put together. That's a little bit of pride, right? That's a little bit of ego. Me too. Okay. Look, I wear the collared shirt, I get a decent haircut. I want to look good. I want to take pride in myself and what I do. But to a certain extent. And if you have this belief system that you always have to have the answer, that you're the one that has to come up with the solution, or that what is some therapist going to tell me that I don't already know about myself, that's ego.
Ooh, I was looking this up the other day, and I'm sorry to cut you off. Main character syndrome.
Tell me more.
So it's basically when you feel like the world revolves around you. You feel like you're supposed to have all the answers. You're supposed to know what's going on. You're supposed. It's I related to, how you mentioned earlier, just how comfortable we are in today's day and age. I relate that to getting things quick. Everyone's so the microwave, the Uber, the just an excessive amount of pleasure.
That's right.
Everything in excess does damage, right?
That's right.
Everything, even pleasure. You're like, I can have too much pleasure. What
Yeah.
are you talking about, man? But yeah, when you take a step back and you try to break it down a little bit more, we seek pleasure too much, where it becomes not pleasurable. It becomes toxic to our being.
Vic, I completely agree with that statement. It's undeniably true that we do, but that's why actually I think it's a contributing factor to the uptick and anxiety and depression, because pleasure is fleeting, especially the pleasures that our brain crave. Ultimately, I think what's missing is deep meaning. And deep meaning is actually cultivated through resistance, tension, pressure, and persistence towards the pursuit of a higher goal. When something's easy, nobody cares.
Yep.
And that's why I do think that we are a society that's going to continue to go down the path of increased stress, overwhelm, depression, and anxiety, because frankly, life is the easiest it's ever been, and we haven't been able to fill the purpose-driven life aspect in a meaningful way. And the delayed gratification that you talked about, they actually did a study in the 1970s, a bunch of Stanford scientists. And what they did is they took two groups of kids, and I don't know if you two have heard of this study. It's pretty interesting. They basically sat down this kid, and they put a marshmallow in front of him, and they said, I have to go to the other room. If you want, you can have this marshmallow right now. That's fine. But if you wait, when I come back into the room, I'll give you 2 marshmallows. So they did this experiment. And what they found is that the kids who waited, and by the way, this doctor would be gone 10, 15 minutes. That's a long time for a little kid. What they found when they followed up with the families of both sets of kids, the ones that took the marshmallow right away and the ones that waited, is that the ones that were able to delay gratification were far more likely to go on and attend university, have better grades, and then get better jobs upon graduation, because they were able to successfully essentially see the vision of where they wanted to go, but wait for that dopamine hit. Because our brain is a feedback loop. So we like things that give us feedback right away. Touch the stove, that's hot, don't touch that. Eat this, that tastes good, I want more of that. She looks good, I had that, that's great. Boom. I'm just saying how it is. This is how our brains operate.
You're a fact.
But what we really suck at, what our brains really suck at, is predicting how we'll feel in the future.
Discipline.
Exactly. Which is why that study was so profound, because we are living in an instant gratification society. So we're getting feedback that Uber Eats is great for us, that this drink is doing the thing for us, that this joint is going to make me feel good at the end of a stressed day. I can fix it, boom, easily. I can do this, I can do that. And what we have to examine, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with substances, Uber Eats, enjoying a nice meal out, is, am I doing this because I enjoy it, or am I doing it to escape something else? And that's what we have to think about. And then obviously we have to examine ego.
Do you think ego is a negative emotion?
I think by and large it has more cons than pros.
Thank you. Thank you. I was just thinking about this the other day. You were mentioning pride, and I've been getting into, trying to look more into. We're always taught to believe that pride is a good thing, but pride is in fact one of the seven deadly sins.
Mm-hmm.
Just like jealousy, just like envy, gluttony, you know. And I'm
Greed.
a person that believes sins aren't all that bad, you know.
Right.
You're allowed to sin, just not in excess, right?
Right.
Once it becomes excessive, that is when it becomes a negative connotation. But I'm gonna skip along to, you mentioned purpose earlier.
Yeah.
And purpose, you meant it, you didn't just say purpose, you said profound purpose, right? And that resonates within me because I've learned to appreciate how doing things without expecting anything in return pays out more than anything else that I've done for myself, right? Like
Right.
my good buddy Matt and I here met on a mountain snowboarding. It's like one of our favorite things to do. And as yeah, when you mentioned the memory that we can think of that's gonna take us back to a moment that we were having, I'm like, I am happiest when I'm on a mountain.
Yeah. Absolutely. Hell yeah, dude. Me too. There's something nice about that.
What? Oh, we need to hit the slopes, man.
I mean, if you want to just watch an idiot go down a mountain and trip and fall all over himself and get whistled at and have the mountain patrol screaming OC, which I found out means out of control, then yeah, by all means, let's go. I mean,
I'd be like watching myself go down a mountain. You can ask Matt. Oh man. But I have found that the most profound moments in my life were when I was doing things without expecting anything in return. And when I joined my fraternity, character was one of our foundational values and morals, And I have learned that, everyone has a different definition for character, but two of my main ones are: your character is determined when you do the things that you're doing when no one else is watching, right? And then the things that you do without expecting anything in return. Those two things are how I understand character, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to, loop that into how our character plays a part in our purpose, right? And once we have began our journey into purpose, we can start to unlock certain forms of wellness, mental health, having a balance of the body, the mind, and the spirit, because if one of these three things is off, you're going to feel like everything is wrong, right? If your body's doing bad, your mental and your spirit are going to be, they're not going to be at ease, right? So learning how to balance these three things off, we can do that. I have learned when we're searching and doing for our purpose. And we all have different purpose. So I feel like this is actually a conversation that I had with someone the other day, and they put it like this: when you're in school and you're taking a test, you're taught to not share, to not work on getting this answer together, right? When in fact, I feel like we need to teach people and kids and the next generation how to share more, because eventually, if I feel like this is my purpose, and so for example, Matt and I collaborate on other things besides the podcast, and I work with other real estate agents. So I've noticed that I have a part to play in real estate agents' business, and they have a part to play in my business, right? So stepping into how we can come together and listen to others and see, learn how, what we're doing, our part to play, how our puzzle piece plays into the overall big puzzle. And I wanted you to kind of connect the importance of like mental health and purpose, and how we can improve our mental health by chasing our purpose.
Mm. Well, I'd say I'd be plenty happy to do business with both of you, because you're in touch with the law of reciprocity, and there is a spiritual component to business where you're willing to do more for others in some cases than they're even willing to do for themselves. And when you lead from a place of service, this is why you see people like you two getting connected. It's people vibrating and operating out of a higher frequency and healthier mindsets. And Vic, I mean, I know your story. You've shared it with me, and to see where you're at now, man, it's just an absolute testament. But I literally completely agree with you. I think, in fact, I was just I'm mentoring a guy from South Central, low income, single mother, never had great access to resources. And we need to be teaching the soft skills in school. We need to teach what you just talked about in school. That needs to be a class. Because why does a kid that comes from a low income family with one mother, lots of trauma in the household, potentially abuse, give a shit about geometry for if they don't have the foundational skills to live a happy, healthy, fulfilling life? Because in their world, all they see is hopelessness. And we've talked about that with your story. And I think it's a testament to you. But I do think that we do need to be sharing more, and we need to be sharing more of the skills, life skills that can, sure, let me give you the foundational stuff so that when you are doing geometry, it's relevant to you because it's in your path, the direction you want to go. But you know how to be an outstanding human being first, and have the resiliency tools, right? Meditation being one of them. But connecting purpose to mental health, it's super easy, man. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that's why incrementally, like, money only matters on the edge. So if you're somebody that has scarcity around food, water, shelter, clothes, and safety, the things that our brains crave, because our brain's number one function is survival. That is it. That is what our brains are. That is their main function, is survival. So that Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a pyramid, and at the bottom of that, the first two rungs of that are, let's make sure people are getting fed, water, shelter, clothes, and safety, meaning that the home environment's safe. They're in a community where they feel respected and heard. And as you move your way up that triangle, at the very top is the purpose aspect. And until those basic needs are met, it's really, really hard to create a purpose for yourself, because you're living in a world of scarcity and not abundance. So first, we have to help every American and every person worldwide get to that point. But in terms of purpose and meaning are really, really important, not for the good times, but for the bad, because they give you a reason to keep moving forward. Mm-hmm. And they give you a reason to wake up every single day and get out of bed. And so I'm actually a huge advocate that every single person start their journey of finding their meaning in life. And purpose sounds really daunting. What I mean by meaning is just something that's meaningful to you. And even better if you start to think through the lens of helping other people, because they actually did a study, and what they found is that people that volunteer actually showed lower levels of stress and higher levels of happiness overall. Like people that just did volunteer work that involved helping others. So when you are, to any listeners right now, when you're thinking about creating that meaning in your life, think about it through the lens of, how can this help somebody else? And in your guys' world, for Matt, like this could be like, okay, I'm not just in real estate to make my money, because I know that over $100,000, the return on investment for happiness from the money I make, it's the law of diminishing returns. It just continues to go down and down and down and down and down until you get up into like 50 billion plus or 50 million plus. Okay, then it's a different category, but you're still going to have struggles. But like for an American that's making over $100,000 a year, like you are in the pinnacle. Like you've won. You got out of poverty, you got out of scarcity, and if you're doing something you love, you've won. So in Matt's world, maybe it's not just looking at real estate as a vehicle to continue to make more and more money, but as a vehicle to impact more and more people. How can I get somebody who maybe was homeless before into a home? How can I get somebody, a single mother with 2 kids, into that was living in a 1-bedroom into a 2-bedroom? That drastically changes her standard of living, right? Just as an example, where he shifts his perspective. And I'm not saying that you don't already do this. I'm just giving an example.
You have to do it that way. That's
Exactly.
crazy you said that, because I have a client, single mother, 1-bedroom. She's looking for a 2-bedroom.
There you go. See, and that feels so good when you do that for somebody else. And that's the thing, because you literally, she'll probably, maybe she won't say it right away, but at some point she'll either think it or she'll tell you, like, you really changed my life. Like you got me into a bigger home.
That took me some time to get to that point. Because if I'm completely honest with myself, I'm an extremely money hungry individual.
Of course, we all are.
So like,
it's never enough.
But once I shifted my perspective and like kind of, because I'm like understanding sales and understanding how to be successful, it comes and stems from service. You're not even thinking about the money. You're thinking about, okay, this is the situation they're in. Let me help them as much as possible. And if I continue to put that energy out there, then the success will come. The return that I'm looking for will come.
I agree with that to my core. And what's funny is like the return on investment that you'll get in happiness and fulfillment is so much more than, because the money's fleeting, right? I mean, I think we've all experienced, like, okay, you're making this much and then you jump up to this and you're happy for like the 2 months that it lasted, and then you habituate. Yeah. Right. You get used to it. You're like, oh, this is my new standard of living. I'm used to this now. And you fall back to your average level of happiness. And so one way to,
and that exactly what you're saying right now is exactly why I'm going crazy right now, because I'm not in my routine. Because in my routine and in my habits, I know, okay, this is my high producing activity. This is my routine. When I do this, it yields successful results.
That's right. Absolutely. And I'm the same way. And I even know when I'm most productive, which is in the morning. Like anything before noon is peak Zach. Anything afternoon is, you're going to get a variation. And so, and I know my brain, that's the other thing. And that's, that I see where we're at with time, but that's a whole other conversation. Understanding your energy levels and when you're best suited to serve others. Because that's kind of what Matt's talking about. His most productive hours, maybe he's prospecting, building out new clients, showing a house, connecting with a new client and hearing their challenges. He's serving. If you're doing it right, you're serving. Right. And that feels good. But if you're tired, if you're groggy, your mind can wander. Maybe you miss something. It's not as easy to serve. So I always talk about, when it comes to the brain, self-care for service. I sleep 9 hours a night for me so that I can serve others. I go to the gym and work out in the morning because I feel my best throughout the day so I can serve others. I might take a nap at 3 p.m. from 3 to 4 because I'd rather do that than drink a cup of coffee that keeps me up all night so that I can wake up and serve others. Self-care for service. So it's about you, but it's about them. And that's the difference.
I like that.
Zach, your level of self-awareness is like peaked right now, bro. Like the
It's
fact
not
that you
even. It's not
no,
even. I've got so much room, dude.
it's I understand. I say it's relative, you know, because
Sure.
you mentioned how you need to know yourself in order to be able to do more and do more for others. And I wanted to lead that into this quote from Mahatma Gandhi that says,
Mm,
"The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others."
yeah, I completely agree with that.
I feel like that would,
And
yeah,
another one is Buddha, and he said, no, it was the Dalai Lama, and he said, if you can help others, do it. If you can't, at least don't hurt them. So it's a similar thing, right? It's That's why self care for service is so important. You need to be peak, not for you, because in our country, it's all about you. Self care for you. You go get that bubble bath, go get that massage for you. But when you take it that next step, it ties back to the primal instincts that we all have inside of us, this desire to connect, this desire to be a part of something bigger, and this desire to contribute back to the tribe. Because if you think about it, we evolved from nomads, right? We were hunter gatherers, and think about how much community and purpose you had back then.
yeah. I actually something interesting. I'm glad you mentioned that. I've done some research that before, you know, you didn't know who exactly was the parent of said child because the tribe would just assume responsibility. This is our child, and
Right.
everyone would just care and instill and just teach without, you know, that um parental guidance that
Yep.
we're so used to in today's day and age. Which, you know, yeah.
It's very true, and that's that's a big area that I'm studying right now. So I can't speak into it super intelligently. All I know is that there's a hunter gatherer aspect that we need to learn to infuse into modern society in the forms of community, connection, and uh, contribution back to the tribe.
Yeah.
Now, how you define that's part of the process. But those are the things, that's everything that we've talked about today: meaning, right? Purpose, connection, community service to others, all of those things. Those are natural human traits. But in the modern world, we've gotten away from that.
Hmm.
Yeah, the last 100 years have been just phenomenally just a lot of things have been happening to
Oh, yeah.
influence us, but I wanted to lead that into, you know, we're about to wrap it up. So we'll wrap it up with the reason that we do this podcast is to bring that conversation of wealth to the community. You know, we're doing this to
Mm,
give back to, you know, like you mentioned, I come from a low income family, single mom, two kids, like the
I
painter.
loved your story.
Yeah, thank you.
Loved it. Yeah.
um, the picture that you painted earlier, you know, I live that, and being able to have these conversations to bring this topic in a capacity that is digestible,
Mm,
and not only digestible but practical. You know, I feel like we dropped a lot of practical information here that can be put into use. I'd say as soon as people are done watching it, if not while they're watching the podcast. So, Matt, is there anything else you'd like to touch in there? I know there was a bunch of topics that we didn't even get to touch on.
Yeah, no, man. I think yeah, we come in and we always try to cover as much as we can, but I think we just all get lost the track, getting caught in the conversation and the organic feel of it. But yeah, I mean, it's just more about bringing important topics like this one to the
mm,
community. Um,
mm,
and this is part of service, right? This is part of our service to our community. Is just bringing some of the things that like weren't taught in school, weren't taught in the household, weren't, and really kind of put that on a platform for people to see, hear, and
mm.
hopefully get some valuable insight from it so that they can help and build their own lives and what their belief in wealth is.
Mm, I love that. I'm so grateful that you guys built this platform. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for
I'm making a direct request right now to please be a part of the Nomad research that you're doing, because I that just it really resonated inside of me how you want to connect that, togetherness and community aspect back into society. And I had mentioned earlier about our morals and things like that, and that'll be a conversation for another day. But reevaluating the way we think and our morals is something that people need to hear different perspectives,
Mm,
wealthy perspectives, and that's what we're doing here, baby.
I love that. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I do believe that this is a part of building a wealthy perspective, because wealth can be defined in so many different ways.
Mhm.
And I will tell you, I am putting together, it's infancy stages, so this isn't going to come out tomorrow, but I am putting together a small list of people to do a camping trip out west for a long weekend. And it's going to be hikes, bonfires, camping out in nature, getting back to that nomadic in nature feel. So when that happens, man, I'll be the first to let you know, because we're going to be doing meditations during the day, hikes. There's going to be plenty of storytelling and real meaningful conversations at night around the bonfire. Healthy food. You can consider it a cleanse of the mind, the body, and the spirit, just like what you talked about earlier in the podcast. It's going to be all that.
Mm.
So not coming out tomorrow, but it's going to be happening.
Awesome.
That spoke to me. Thank you.
Before you go, I know Vic had mentioned you have a book out, and where can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Matt. So, if you're looking to connect with me on social, at Zach, which is spelled with an H, underscore Westerbeck, which is spelled with all E's. You can
Oh,
find
there
me
it
on
is.
Instagram. Yep. So at Zach underscore Westerbeck, there it is. Yep, there it is. It's on the back of my book, which leads into the next thing. So at Zach underscore Westerbeck on Instagram. You can find my book on Amazon, on Amazon, on Amazon, and it's You're Not Alone. You can just type in You're Not Alone, my name, and it'll pop up. And then you can find me, if you want to connect more, you can obviously DM me on Instagram, or on my website there's a contact me button, so you can click that and reach out to me via email at zachwesterbeck.com. So those are really the three core areas. And I did just roll out a YouTube page about a month ago, so I've got some videos populated up there. Zach Westerbeck. Again, if you search me on YouTube, you'll find me that way. And those are tips, tricks, and best practices, all the things that I wish I would have known back in 2016 when I experienced the onset of my brain disorder. I'm just sharing that information back with others so that they can recover in their own journeys and live a happy, fulfilling, wealthy, I should say, life.
Nice.
All right, fellas. Well, this has been monumentally an experience for the books. We're gonna need to have you back in about 6 months or something, Zach, to get an update and touch on some of those topics that we didn't really get to tackle with this conversation. But we are extremely grateful for your presence, and just $1 million gems got dropped here and there and everywhere during this conversation. So thank you.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. All right.
Peace
You
out.
too. Peace.
Ubuntu.
Ubuntu.